Hello, and welcome to How to Beat Your Kids at Board Games. I'm John.
And I'm Dan.
And today we are bringing to you a special game, the French game of Carcassonne. Wait, is it a French game, Dan?
It's actually a German-style board game, John.
Okay. But, now, and I might be wrong here, I think Carcassonne is a French city, right?
Why, that is correct, John. Carcassonne was designed as a game by Klaus, Jürgen, Wrede, and launched by Hans im Glück in 2000. The name Carcassonne is the name of a French city. It's a city in the south of France. It was built up in medieval times and is known for its heavily fortified walls.
Yeah, you should check it out. If you ever get a chance to look it up, it's kind of a ridiculous city.
Oh, it looks it looks like something out of a storybook or something out of a Carcassonne box.
Yeah,
it looks exactly like the city tiles. So it's great.
Yeah.
So Carcassonne, as I mentioned, is a German-style game or Euro game, and it's considered one of the big four of Eurogames. The other three are Catan, which we've already gone through on this podcast, Agricola, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that yet.
I think it's Agricola.
Agricola, okay. And Ticket to Ride, which we just played over Christmas break, and that was super fun.
Well, yeah, I just got a copy for Christmas, so, I'm not making any promises, but as far as upcoming episodes, it's pretty hot button.
Pretty likely that we'll eventually have an episode on Ticket to Ride. But today we're talking about Carcassonne. Just to be clear about Eurogames, to review, this means that there's a sort of non-trivial interpersonal element of the game. There's less of an emphasis on direct conflict and more of an emphasis on sort of indirect grappling, if you will. There are opportunities for cooperation, but there are also opportunities to mess with people, to put it nicely. Mm-hmm. The nice thing about Carcassonne is it's relatively quick to play compared to other Euro games. Usually you're done in under 45 minutes, although if you're like John and me, who just played a couple games before we started this podcast, maybe want to double that.
Yeah, but anyway, we were spending a lot of time talking about our decisions, and we had one particularly close game where we were spending a lot of time on each move and actually, like advising each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Things
so
like that.
Yeah, the annotation will take quite a lot of time. So, But anyway, if you're just playing with a group of friends, not thinking too much about it, won't take too long. So that's what's nice about it. Makes it easy to play many games in quick succession, which is also great for learning because you get your feedback sort of immediately on whether what you did was good or bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Carcassonne's a great game. Also, it has that sort of like factor of just making you feel good when you play it.
Totally.
It's a very satisfying game to play. So there's a lot of like, when you first break out the game, like I broke it out and it was like I played it once and I was like, oh my, I immediately want to play this thing again.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's not it's not too slow. It's pretty fast paced and also like not something where the first time you play it you're freaking out about all your decisions. Right. You're kind of just like, oh yeah, I guess I'll just do this and see what happens.
Yeah, and
you don't really feel bad.
Yeah, and another part of what makes it fun, even if you're just beginning, is there's a lot of randomness involved. So even if you're a novice, it's not unheard of to beat someone who's just super skilled at the game, because there's a lot of randomness when it comes to drawing tiles, etc. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anything else you wanted to go through in the overview before we get to the rules blitz, John?
Nope, nothing here for me.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's get into rules blitz. Cue the music.
Alrighty, and welcome to Rules Blitz, starting with rule number 1. Carcassonne can be played by 2 to 5 players.
Each turn, players build out the game board by taking a random tile from the draw pile and placing it so the features make sense.
Each tile has at least one of 4 features on it: roads, cities, monasteries, or fields. Expansions add other features such as gardens or the river.
Players start the game with 7 game pieces, or Meeple, each.
When a player places a tile, they may place one of their available meeples onto a feature of the tile they placed, as long as this feature is not already occupied by another player.
Players score points based on the features they place their meeples on.
Players can get their meeples back by completing the features that they're placed on.
Cities and roads are completed by closing out the structure. Monasteries are completed when all of the adjacent tiles are placed. Fields are never technically complete.
Once a feature is complete, the meeple occupying that feature are returned to the player's hands. The player with the most meeple on the feature wins the points associated with it. If it's a tie, both players get full points.
The game ends when there are no tiles left to play.
At the end of the game, meeple left on incomplete features earn the points associated with those features.
Scoring is counted as follows.
A completed city counts for 2 points per tile. Tiles with a pennant or shield on them count double.
An incomplete city counts for 1 point per tile, with pennant tiles also counting double.
A road counts for 1 point per tile.
A monastery or garden counts for 1 point per adjacent tile.
And lastly, a field counts for 3 points per completed city the field borders.
All right, and the player at the end with the most points wins the game.
Alrighty, and that has been Carcassonne Rules Blitz. Okay, we're back, and Dan and I have taken a hefty break. This is hours later after recording our Rules Blitz. It really takes a lot out of us, so we have to kind of recuperate. I think we're about ready to get into the strategy and tips for Carcassonne.
All right, sounds good. So we're going to get into quite a bit today. We're going to start with the more basic rules of thumb. Then we'll get into some more advanced strategy and tactics. So we're pretty excited. But let's start out with some rules of thumb. Rules of thumb. Man, I need an antacid apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, so like we said in the rules blitz, we have 3 different features. Well, 4 if you count fields, and fields are different in a way we'll explain later. But so you have roads, you have cities, you have monasteries, and you have fields. And it may seem to a novice that these are like, why would you want to build a road in a different way that you want to build a city, for example? But it turns out you want to treat each of these relatively differently when you're thinking about how to place the tiles in the best way. So a good general rule of thumb. Let's start with roads.
Mm-hmm.
In general, you want to build your roads out. You don't want to double back in.
Out from what?
Out from the center of the board.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, the game starts with 1 tile placed, and then the first player plays their first tile, etc. So as the board gets bigger, there's going to be opportunities to build out away from the center. There's also going to be opportunities to build back into the center. And if you're able to do both, you always generally want to choose out, whether it's a road or a city, actually, because the more tiles that surround the tile that you're placing or wanting to place, the harder it is going to be to complete that structure in the end.
It's like find the right tile. So with the case of roads, right, you got to build these roads and roads sort of always, a road always comes in from the side of a tile and goes out another side of the tile, unless the road finishes at by like going into a monastery or leading into a city. But so you have to sort of line up these sides of the tiles so that the road continues on, right? But the thing is that, you don't just have to line that up. You also have to make sure that the rest of the tile say you have a tile with just a straight road and there's fields on either side. You need to make sure that wherever you're placing, that the fields sort of stretch out onto the adjacent tiles as well. You don't just need to worry about the road. And so that's what we're talking about here. And that's what, we said in the rules blitz that, the tile placement has to make sense. You can't have this roads ending into oblivion. And so basically the more tiles there are around you, the more different features you're going to have to sort of match up.
Right. So example, if you need to fill a space and on one side there's a city and on another side there's a road and on another side there's a field, you're going to need a pretty specific tile to actually put into that space and finish your, say, city that you're working on. But if you built out instead, you might have nothing surrounding the space of the tile you want to place,
except like the one tile.
Except like the one tile that you just placed, yeah. And so you have much fewer constraints, and as a result, there are many more tiles that will sort of fit the bill for continuing or finishing that project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yes, I mean, and this is kind of a theme here. We're bringing it up first with roads, but yeah, definitely build roads out. And I mean, I think the other unique thing about, well, again, this isn't so unique, but one unique thing about roads that I found like really handy was that a good rule of thumb to follow is that you only want to place a meeple down on a road that is already capped at one end. Mm-hmm. So like a road that's like open-ended both ways is going to be a lot harder to finish. Because not only do you have to find a tile that ends the road on the right side, or the bottom, whatever, you also have to find a tile that ends the road on the other side. Mm-hmm. So it's like twice as much work for you to actually get the points out of that, to get your meeple back from that road. Right.
And as we'll explain later, getting your meeple back is pretty important, but we're not quite there yet. So yeah, you want to build when the road is capped at one end. Talking about cities, unless you had anything more on roads.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind with roads, and that we'll come back to with farms, but like one thing that roads serve to do is split up farms, split up fields. Sorry.
Okay.
So like when you're placing your road and you aren't necessarily building a road for yourself, you can also think about the fact that your road can very cleanly divide up fields, or like bound in a field that someone has already claimed.
Okay.
So that's like, I think, one purpose that roads serve, because I mean, compared to cities, like, I don't know, building a road isn't quite as satisfying as completing a city.
Definitely true.
And so you think like, all right, what if these were just all cities? But then you sort of you don't have this interesting shaping of the fields that you get with roads. So I think that's actually pretty important.
Yeah, and a larger theme that I glean from that is you want to really see the whole board. You don't want to just think about the tile that you're placing right now, but the implications that it has for the rest of the board, because the sort of composition of the board is constantly changing as more tiles are being put down, specifically when it comes to fields. As you said, the shape of the field is changing, the number of cities that it touches is changing to the likelihood of completing certain projects like cities, etc., is changing. And so, there's more to placing tiles than like building your own projects.
Right. Yeah. And so moving on to, cities, I think we're good.
I think we're good.
And so cities score twice as much as roads if they're completed. But, they score about the same as roads if they're incomplete. So really, like, completion seems like you really want to head towards completing that city.
Yeah.
Another thing, like, just sort of geometrically that I'll mention is that cities always go around corners of the tiles. They don't like interact with the sides. You match up the corners of a city.
Yes.
Or the corners of a tile to like build a city.
Yeah. Okay. I had never thought about that. Yeah. So yeah, the roads you match on the sides and the cities you match on the corners.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if that even means anything as far as gameplay goes, but it helps me remember like what kind of shapes you can get from a city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the number of shapes you can get from a city are near boundless. Just because of the way they sort of can be contorted. So I guess when it comes to cities, the thing to remember is they're pretty hard to complete. Like just that as a baseline is helpful to remember. So a good rule of thumb when you're building your cities, when you have a city that you have placed your meeple on, you want to try not to increase the number of, quote, caps you need to close it. So what is a cap, you ask? A cap is a tile, at least as we refer it to it, is a tile that has a sort of one-side city, not two-side, not three-side, but just one side is a city. And so if you have sort of one edge of the tile...
is taken up by a city.
One edge of the tile is taken up by a city. So in other words, if you have an incomplete city that has like one edge open, you can use this cap to complete your city.
Yeah.
So if you have
like caps have the city walls going along the side of the tile, not along the diagonal of the tile.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
You can think of that. That I mean, in general, that's what a cap is. Something that can, because it only goes on one side, it can sort of close off a city.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, so you want to decrease the number of edges that are open on your incomplete city whenever possible, so that you need a fewer number of caps to complete it. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you might not want to extend your city, even though it gives you more points. If you add a tile and it increases the number of edges you need to finish, you might not want to do that to your city. You might want to add it to a different city.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I would agree. You really want to just keep in mind that they're hard to finish. We've already said that enough, so
yeah,
we could move on here.
So make your cities easier to finish, and moving on to farms. The rule of thumb here is pretty straightforward, but it's much harder in practice. But don't build farms early in the game. Why is this the case? Because once you place a meeple face down on a farm, which is how you place it, you can never use that meeple again. He's a farmer for life. He's settled down. So if you place a meeple early in the game, you're foregoing a lot of potential points that he could score
somewhere else
on something else.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So in general, you want to not place farmers too early in the game. Farmers on fields. There's obviously a balance though, because fields can be very lucrative, especially if they're connected to a lot of cities. Mm-hmm. So you also sort of want to be the first one to claim the lucrative farm, and you want to keep control of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the games we were playing and that I've played in practice, the biggest field tends to be worth anywhere from 12 to 20 something points.
Exactly.
They can get really up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So it's a non-trivial number of points, but
it's a big commitment.
It's a big commitment, and the earlier you do it in the game, the more potential points you're foregoing. So it's a delicate balance. I don't think either of us have quite mastered this yet, based on the game we just played.
Right.
But
yeah.
But
I mean, also placing a farmer early comes with the effect that people probably won't be they don't want to build as many cities on your field, which means in a 4-player game, you might not score as much overall. You might slow down your opponents from making cities, but if someone else has a better field somewhere, you might just kind of lose out in the long run because you want your farm to score a lot, but no one's going to want to build on it.
Exactly. And I would also say, don't place a farmer on a field. Again, this is a rule of thumb. We'll get into more tactics later, but don't place a farmer unless you have sort of a guaranteed payoff. So if you're early in the game and no one's placed a farmer yet, and you see this field and you're like, this field looks pretty good because
a lot of people have started cities on this.
Yeah, there's these 3 incomplete cities here, and then these 2 complete cities here. This is going to be a good field. Hold off on placing that farmer because those 3 incomplete cities might not end up being complete, and so you might think in your mind, 15 points, and it ends up being 6 points.
Right.
And you've lost half the game by putting down a farmer.
Yeah.
So anyway, final rule of thumb for me for farmers is just in general be cautious.
Yeah.
Like it's usually the case that you can find a decent field in the end of the game. Even if you don't get the biggest field, you might be able to find a good field or two.
Yeah.
And then you can focus your meeple power on the rest the rest of the ways you can earn points throughout the rest of the game.
I mean, and I feel like farmers are just a great thing to put down in the last few turns of the game.
Yeah.
Because it
can be devastating.
In the last few turns of the game, sometimes you've got like tiny little cities left to complete, or like maybe you can put a meeple down on some road that's not going to finish for like 3 points, or you can try and snag a farm that's worth 6.
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, 6 points is a lot better than 3 or 4 when you're trying to play, when it's the end of the game and things are really tight. So I mean, farmers, even if they're not grabbing the biggest field, I think are just great to play in the end of the game.
Definitely. Okay. Moving on to monasteries. Monasteries are can be very efficient ways to earn quick points, depending on the version of the game you're playing. We'll get into the extension in more detail in a second when we talk about the abbot. But in general, with monasteries, you want to be very cautious, because in order to complete your monastery, you need all 8 adjacent tiles to be built.
Yeah.
So
8 tiles is a lot of tiles.
It's a lot of tiles. So you might think, oh, monastery, 8 points. That's a lot of points. Just be mindful of the cost it takes to build around. And so I would say that not that if you get a monastery, you should place it and not put a meeple on it if you can, but you should be very careful about where you place it, because if you place it somewhere and then even one of those 8 tiles is eventually blocked off, that's one meeple you've lost.
Yeah. And I mean, an incomplete monastery is essentially the same effect as having a small field, right? Somewhere between 6 to 8 points is what I would guess, and you lose the meeple for the rest of the game. So you can kind of think of it. It is a similarly strong commitment to placing a farmer in the field, but they're also, like Dan said, with careful placement, you can sort of mitigate this risk. One thing that I like to do with monasteries is, there's a couple things, but the first one is that monasteries weirdly go well next to other monasteries.
Yes.
And this is because generally there's monasteries tend to be surrounded by fields on at least 3 sides. I mean, and like most of them are like 4 of the monasteries in the deck are surrounded fully by fields, and fields are actually really easy to build off of,
right?
Compared to like roads and especially cities.
Yeah.
So a monastery next to a monastery. I mean, first of all, if it's next to a monastery that someone else controls, then they're going to want to build out their monastery, which means they're going to do like half your job for you. And then you can focus on the other half, basically, of the 8 tiles.
Exactly. And an important point that you hit on there is letting your opponents do the work for you. So definitely when you're talking about a monastery next to a monastery, but also, if you can build next to a road or a city that you're very confident, and again, be careful with cities, that you're very confident that your opponent is going to try to complete. In other words, like they're already on this road, it's like capped on one end, they're definitely going to try to finish it. And
maybe they need the meeple back or something.
Maybe they need the meeple back, and like it just so happens that to complete this road, they're going to have to go through 2 squares adjacent to your monastery. Think about building there instead of somewhere else where you would be the primary one to build the squares around your monastery, because you definitely don't want to, we've talked about duplication and diversification in the past, but you don't want to be in the case where you have this tile and you could drop it on a city and gain some quick points, or you could use it to complete your monastery and get your meeple. You don't want to have to choose between those 2 things. You want to let other people do some of the work for you. so
Right.
you can be more efficient on your turns.
Yeah, and duplication and diversification. That's I believe from the infamous Backgammon Zoom episode.
Yes.
So you're kind of a real fan if you've seen that. If you've listened to that episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, diversification, duplication. Like Dan's saying, if you have too much to do at once, then your turns don't feel as well. If the same tile you need in like 3 different spots, then you're kind of in a rough spot because you have to draw 3 of those tiles to really get what you need.
Exactly.
And so that's what he's saying with monasteries is like monasteries tend to need a lot of specific tiles to complete. And so if any of those overlap with other specific tiles you need, you could be in for a bit of a bruising.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you really have to be careful and building. It's sort of this trade-off because, clearly if you build a monastery out on the outside of the board, then it's going to be very easy to build around it. But then you'll have to do more building to get the thing back. So it doesn't really matter in the end.
Yeah, like your opponents, if you're out on the edge of the board, your opponents are probably less likely to say, "Oh, there's less likely to be a project out there that your opponent needs to complete."
Yeah, they can just ignore that side of the board pretty much.
Right. So you want to use a little bit of it's a little bit of judo here. You use your opponent's momentum against them, kind of thing. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so now that we've talked about monasteries, there's a special piece in the expansion pack,
and it's a common expansion.
I'm pretty sure now it might even come with the basic game. I don't know.
I got it with the basic game.
Right.
If you have an old version of the game, you might not have the abbot, but I believe it's basically coming in the standard pack right now. So we're going to talk about it here.
Yeah. So the abbot is a pretty cool piece. It's not super versatile.
No, exactly.
But
I would say it does add versatility to your other pieces.
Absolutely.
Other meeples.
Absolutely. So what the abbot can do is you can place an abbot on a monastery or a gardens, and a gardens is a
They just look like a flower box.
It's like a little rectangle flower box that you'll see on the square, and nothing can be placed on this gardens in the original game, but this abbot piece can be placed on there or a monastery.
And they both score the same.
They both score exactly the same. So, if you've got a tile with a gardens and an abbot, all that tile and all the tiles adjacent to it will score 1 point. Right? So the cool thing about the abbot, along with being able to be placed on a gardens, is that in lieu of placing a meeple on any given turn, you can actually take back your abbot from your monastery or gardens where you have it placed, and you can score then, instead of waiting to the end of the game or waiting until all 8 squares around that monastery or gardens are complete. And so you get it back in hand to place it again and take it back and score again, and then place it and take it back and score again. So you can actually score quite a few times with the abbot in a game if you get, good draws. So it can be a very powerful, very potent game piece.
Yes, and I think I don't know if you mentioned this. You might have, but you can't. The turn that you take the abbot back, you can't place a meeple down. So a lot of times, like you think like, okay, I feel like I'm wasting a turn by taking this abbot back, but actually that's a bit of a logical fallacy because, especially because the abbot's the only piece that can be put on a gardens. Having an abbot in your hand, it's kind of
like free points.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically free points. It's kind of strange because you when your abbot's in your hand, you want it to be out on the board. And when your abbot's on the board, you want it back in your hand as soon as possible.
Exactly.
The grass is always greener, I guess.
Yeah. So, and we will get into this later, why this is the case, but you definitely will not be placing a meeple every turn, or you shouldn't be placing a meeple every turn.
If you did, that would be kind of insane.
If you place a meeple every turn, then very soon you will have no more meeple left to place, and you'll be very sad while everybody else keeps scoring points and you're stranded. So what I mean to say by that is you will have these downturns. So I'm not saying like,
and not even downturns, but maybe turns where you're building out a city that you're already occupying, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So when I say downturns, I mean turns where you don't have a profitable new project to build on.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just drop down a city for a quick 4 points, or you can't like complete a road or whatever. Essentially you don't have anything you could do that would be worthwhile to actually put a meeple down.
Mm-hmm.
And your abbot is out on the board. You should just take that abbot back and put it back in your hand. You should even do this if the tiles around it are not complete.
Yeah, like if it's not even going to score that many points.
Exactly.
Because, you can think of it this way. Like when you have a turn where you're debating whether you take your abbot back, you're like, all right, if I don't take this abbot back, maybe next turn I'll build something around it and score 1 more point from this abbot.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that what happens if the next turn you draw another gardens?
Mm-hmm.
Then you've missed out on like 4 to 9 points.
Mm-hmm.
So you stand to lose a lot by leaving your abbot out too long and drawing a gardens that you can't put the abbot on.
Yeah.
And more than you stand to gain by putting 1 more tile or hoping that people put 1 or 2 more tiles around your existing abbot.
Exactly. And another reason you want to have it in your hand in case a gardens or a monastery is pulled is there are 6 monastery tiles and 8 gardens tiles in the basic edition, and there are 72 tiles total.
Right.
So that's about a fifth of the tiles have a monastery or garden on them,
and a lot of gardens too compared to monasteries.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of these tiles you can only actually place the abbot on there. So if you have the abbot out on the board and you wanted to take it back last turn but you didn't because you wanted 1 or 2 more tiles to be built around it, you've just lost at least 3, probably more like 5 or 6 points by not having your abbot in hand.
Your habit in and.
Your habit in and, exactly. Which, maybe the abbot wears a habit. But, so you really want to be putting it down and picking it up pretty fast. You want to do that multiple times every game. That's the best way you use the abbot to score.
Mm-hmm.
The other nice thing about the abbot is you don't have to be as picky in terms of which monasteries are where you place your monastery or your gardens. So let's say there's a space that, with an ordinary meeple, let's say you have a monastery and you say, okay, I can place it here and get 6 points immediately, but the rest of these squares will probably not be completed because 1 or 2 of the squares is blocked because say it's late in the game or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
With the abbot, you don't really have to worry about that because even if you're not able to finish those squares around, you can still take the abbot up whenever you want. So you actually just don't have to think about whether this is going to be completed. You can just say, okay, what's going to get me the most points now? Do that.
Yeah. It's a very simple decision-making process.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And so I think, that's I think we're about ready to move on, and it's a pretty decent segue into sort of our advanced, I would say our advanced building section, or our advanced strategy section, which is all about the throughput mindset. So Dan, can you give us a little summary or a little definition of what throughput means?
Yes. So throughput is a term often used in the field of operations. So I did first hear this term in business school. So throughput is...
So basically you have to be a business major or getting your MBA to be good at Carcassonne. Just saying.
Exactly. You need degree required. But no
Just
degree
kidding.
required.
That's what we're here for.
I learned this term in getting my MBA, but I also saw it in a random article on the internet about Carcassonne. So It can really be from anywhere. But essentially throughput is output over time. So applying this to the game, this means you want to maximize your throughput. Like by definition, you want to maximize your output over the course of the game. Like, we can all agree on that, right? So what is your output over the course of the game? It's the sum of the points scored by your 7 meeple over the course of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And at any point in the game, you want to maximize the sum of your points scored by all of your available and potentially available meeple over the course of the remainder of the game.
Okay.
However many turns that might be.
So, like, give me an example of like the throughput mindset. Yeah.
Okay.
Or like common mistake,
Sure.
maybe.
Okay. So let's say you're about halfway through the game and you have this opportunity to claim a city. Let's say there's a city with 3 tiles built on it, but nobody has claimed it yet. Nobody's put a meeple on it yet. And you have the ability. Let's say
how many open caps does it have?
It has. Let's make it real easy. It has 3 open caps.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. So you have a cap in your hand. You can place this cap on this city that has three tiles placed and 3 open caps. Or which and let's say even one of those has a pennant on it. Okay, so this city, if you claimed it, would be worth
5 immediately.
5 immediately and potentially 10 at the end of the game.
If you completed it, it would be at least 14.
If you completed it, it would be at least 14, maybe more by the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's worth 5 immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Now you also have another city. It's just one open cap, and that's it. And you can place the cap in your hand there, and then just drop a meeple and score 4 points immediately.
Yeah, and immediately get your meeple back, right?
Immediately get your meeple back.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this case, it's pretty clear to me that what you would want to do is place immediately and get your meeple back for the 4, because even though this big city is potentially worth as at least 14 points, there's a few problems. One is you might not get it done. Mm-hmm. 2 is, while you're getting it done, your meeple is sitting there on this city stranded, and unable to score any more points. So,
yeah, I mean, like, the amount of points you expect to score from putting on the big city would be anywhere from 5 to 14 plus, right? Which is a big range, but you think you're going to fall somewhere in the range of 5 to 14. If you're lucky, maybe 16, 18.
Right.
But I guess the idea would be that if you score 4 immediately, then later in the game, you score 4 again.
You can score 4 again. You might
drop the same meeple.
You might drop a quick road, like end-to-end road and 2 tiles for 2 points.
Okay, now you've scored like 10, and then last turn of the game you drop it down on a field to score 6.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So the idea is not only does this give you more flexibility, it also just gives you like,
I feel like it requires less investment.
On average, it requires less investment, so you have more resources available to deploy if a good opportunity does present itself, which they often do. There's honestly 4-point cities tend to occur a lot in the game. There's just a lot of tiles with those caps.
I mean, it's got to be the most common size of city, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And so you definitely, and even 3 tile cities with 1 pennant, those occur fairly often too. Like unclaimed, and you just drop a cap and score 8 points immediately. And so my point with this is, good projects tend to come up at any point in the game. You do not want to be left without a meeple in your hand. When you have meeple stranded out on the board, you can the operations term is their inventory. They're like capital, their resources tied up and unable to do anything. So they're not actively working for you. if they're out on the board.
Which is kind of counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, because I remember you used the term earlier today of you have more active meeple, referring to the ones out on the board.
Yeah,
right.
But actually your active meeple are the ones that you can still play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah, because in essence, your meeple on the board are actually like trapped meeple. Yeah.
Right, they're trapped. They're tied up, right? So
they're most definitely not active.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. So that's the mindset. You want to maximize your output, your point output in this case, from now until the end of the game. And so you have 7 meeple in your hand at the start of the game.
Right. I mean, and you're the complicated thing is that it's not. If you just were to maximize 1 meeple, it's a really simple problem. Always put down on the 4 cap on the the 4 city that you can get immediately. But the thing is that you have 7, and so I feel like essentially having more than 1, meeple in your hand or like active meeple means that your other meeple aren't necessarily down scoring as much points as you could be. So it's I don't know.
So it's a delicate balance between obviously if you don't want to be too conservative with your meeple. Like you want to take some risks on some big projects. I mean, I've seen it in I think multiple places that like, a big city is usually a surefire way to win the game if you can get it built.
Right.
And so like you have to be really careful that you don't get stranded, but if it's like halfway through the game and you have 6 meeple in hand or 5 or something like that, then you might want to roll the dice on a big city because you're probably not going to run out of the other meeple.
Well, and I mean, there's smart ways to roll the dice because getting a big city doesn't always mean you put a meeple down on the city with the most tiles.
Right.
It can also come about from you like putting down a meeple on a small city, and then you get a city tile that you can add that actually doesn't increase the amount of open ends of the city. And you just sort of keep doing this, like you keep building out the city in one direction without actually making it any harder to finish the city. All of a sudden you get the right cap, and boom, you have a big city.
Exactly.
And you really haven't been far away from getting that meeple back at any time.
Exactly.
So that's like a smart way to go about building cities.
Yep. And all of these city tiles have sort of different ways to make the city either easier or harder to complete, and it depends on the situation. But yes, absolutely, if you can build the city bigger without making it harder to complete, absolutely do it. The tiles with sort of the cities on 2 opposite sides, and the city cuts through the tile. It's like a sliver of. It's like a sliver of city that connects 2 sort of opposite tiles. It's hard to
sides.
Opposite sides. It's hard.
It
it's kind of hard to
like
describe.
An hourglass shape.
Hourglass shape. Exactly. Yeah. It looks like an hourglass. Those are great for this. They're so great. I mean, if you have one opening,
a lot of them have pennants too.
A lot of them have pennants. Exactly.
3 or something like that have pennants. So.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great way to expand the size of your city without making it harder to complete.
Also, because you can tend to build those straight out from anything else. So actually, it can be easier to finish the city after you use one of those sliver tiles
because it's farther out and it's less surrounded.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And exactly. It doesn't really like lower your throughput or like your expected sort of. We got some technical difficulties here.
All right. Looks like my computer has gone to sleep.
Uh-oh. Dan may be working without some notes here. We're going to see what he can do on his feet. All right, Dan. So now, can you list off every tile in Carcassonne out of the 72 in the deck right now?
Well, we did take a picture earlier today.
That's true. He could whip out his
phone. My
phone.
phone's in the other room. But
you should have come prepared.
Turns out my computer is back on.
All right. Okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Okay. So where were we? So you care about like we don't have the exact right answer for every situation we're ever going to Yeah, wherever going to encounter. But if you just have this mindset of maximizing throughout the whole course of the game instead of this turn, and wanting to keep bringing your meeple back into your hand and intentionally doing that, you're going to do so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing that we kind of just happened upon, or it finally helped things click to me, is that like you want to maximize your meeple flow.
Yes.
Like
exactly.
the more, you don't just want meeple going out or meeple coming in. And like by that I mean like meeple going out to projects and coming back into your hand. You want like both of them to happen at a high rate, but at equal rates.
Yes.
Because if you have more meeple going out, then all of a sudden you'll be without meeple when you have a good opportunity to place one. But if you have more meeple coming back in, then like I think overall you're just not scoring as much.
Exactly. Yeah. So like I said, there's a delicate balance between choosing lucrative projects and choosing completable projects.
Well, and so okay, yeah, lucrative, completable. I'm trying to like justify in my head, why does having more meeple on the board score you more points? And maybe it's because if you have 5 meeple on the board, then the odds of whatever tile you drawing, like that you're able to put it to use on a project that you already own, is greater.
Right.
Okay, so that's got to be it. Like you can use more of your draws, more of your turns to actually score points.
So the more meeple you have on the board, I think the bigger your projects tend to be.
Oh, interesting.
But also
because you can
the less likely that it is that they'll be completed.
Huh.
So it's like more projects versus bigger projects. Like that's sort of the line you're trying to walk.
Gotcha.
Here. So we can leave you all to think more about that. A lot more to explore here. But general rule of thumb here is if you have the opportunity to complete a project and bring back a meeple to your hand, you should absolutely do it. Because you definitely shouldn't say, oh, I can either bring it back now or I can do something else and wait for this project to get bigger later. That's just setting yourself up to fail and to have a bunch of stranded meeple.
It doesn't maximize your flow.
Yeah, it does not maximize.
It just
your
stagnates your inflow.
Yeah. So good rule of thumb to keep at least one free meeple in hand for quick placement projects like those 4-point cities or 2-point roads. And you also want to, this is a good corollary to the throughput mindset, but you want to end the game with no meeple left. This should be your goal. Meeple in your hand at the end of the game are worth nothing. So you want meeple to keep coming back into your hand throughout the game, but by the time the game's over, you want to have used every single one. And think about it this way. You're on the last turn. You have a meeple left, right? Now, at this point, do you want to place on the 4-tile city, or do you want to place on the 1-tile city that you complete and get the meeple back in your hand? Obviously, you want to place on the 4-tile city because it's the last turn.
Right.
So
and you'll score 5 points.
And you'll score 5 points instead of 4.
Doesn't matter about the meeple coming back.
Exactly. So,
and even like on the second to last turn, if you have 2 meeples in hand, same thing. Because you'll have 1 meeple left to play on your last turn.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. And if you think about throughput, you're maximizing your total output for the remainder of the game. So if there are 2 turns left and you can score like 5 points with this meeple and 4 points with this meeple and get neither of them back, that's 4.5 meeple per turn. If you score 4 points with this one and 2 points with this one and you get both of them back, that's 3 points per turn.
It's worse.
It's worse. So getting your meeple back becomes less important as the game goes on. Scoring more points on this turn becomes more important as the game nears the end. Right. So
because as the game comes to an end, the chances of you drawing the right piece to make your project worth a lot decrease, but the chances that there's some already kind of built out project that you can get a few points on increases. Oh yeah. There'd be a lot of like open-ended stuff.
Plenty of projects open toward the end of the game. new fields tend to open up toward the end of the game where you can just have a quick drop for 6 points, or place on a city for 5 points, or a road for 3 points, or whatever. So just be open to that. Start thinking of that as the game ends. So I think now we want to talk about neutralizing and even thwarting your opponents.
Yes, because as a Euro-style game, you're not in direct conflict with everyone on the board, but there's a fair amount of interaction, actually a lot of interaction. Pretty much most of the game is interacting with the placements other people put down. So in Carcassonne, there's a fair amount of snaking to be done.
What do you mean by snaking,
and what do I
John?
mean by snaking? Okay, so there's the whole rule that, if you can't really put down a meeple on a feature that someone's already claimed, but if you have a tile that you've placed sort of catty corner, or that's not actually adjacent to that project, but it's still, say they're both city tiles and your city's one tile away, but it'll hopefully link up later, you can put your boy down.
Yeah. So in other words, if you put it down and the project is not one that somebody else owns, but then later on more tiles get put down to connect, they just happen to connect these two projects, then you actually get in on the action. You get in on those points too.
Yes, yeah. And as if you and the other and another player have the same amount of meeples, you both share the points. But so that's snaking in itself. If someone builds out a huge city for themselves and you put a little cap somewhere down the line and put one guy there, like Dan did to me today, and eventually, you're able to build that cap towards their city and connect the two. Boom, you're sharing the points, and they probably did way more work than you did.
Exactly.
The more extreme case is when you can actually do this twice to put two meeples into a city where they only have one meeple, and then you get all the points, and they actually get nothing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and this technically is true for 2-1 or 3-2 or anything. I've never seen a 3-2 city. But
yeah, we've seen pretty much everything as far as fields now.
Fields get kind of crazy, but city.
I mean, we played a game earlier today where we each had 4 farmers on the same field.
Yes.
Was it
probably
correct?
Not optimal play?
It wasn't optimal. No, but that's how the game ended up.
Yeah.
And so we end up splitting those points. Yeah. And so this is sort of, I think this is like a very dubious act because we talk about how you want to minimize your risk of like leaving stuff out. You want to like be cognizant of the fact that it's hard to complete features, like a lot of features. And then you're going to say like, oh no, but actually you should put this guy down that does nothing immediately and only is able to snake someone else's feature if you draw another good tile to put it. So like,
or multiple good tiles.
It seems dubious, but I mean, it's worth it, right?
It depends. So if you are playing a 2-player game, like one-on-one, it's almost always worth it. Depending, so as long as you make it reasonably likely that tile is going to be drawn. In other words, if you can make it so you only need one tile to be drawn in order to snake in and take this city, it's almost always
common
worth it.
Tile.
And a common tile, exactly.
Hopefully.
A common tile, right?
Which you'll kind of get a feel for as you play. Right. I mean, you can go through the habit of memorizing everything, but like if you need like a road with a bend in it and a city cap, that's not a common tile. But if you just need like a city elbow or something like that, yeah, you'll probably be able to find one.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, knowing the number of tiles is helpful. Just getting a sense, like, look at the board, see what's been played, and you'll get a rough idea of what's left. But you,
especially with 2-player too, you can also like sort of build in a way that like the other player can't avoid, like can't swerve out of the way,
right? Because
it's like if you can build to the point where it's like, okay, only one specific tile will fit in between these two cities where like I have, a meeple in over here and you have a meeple over there, and only one tile will connect them. But also that's like the only tile you could even play in between these two cities. Then it just becomes like, how likely am I to draw that tile as opposed to them?
Right.
They can't like build the city out in a different direction and close it off to you.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I feel like that's more of a thing in 2-player than in 4-player, because in 4-player, like, it's not either you or your one opponent that can draw the right tile. It's like you or all 3 of your opponents who would.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're less likely to draw the right tile. The other thing is, the less relative benefit you're getting. So the more resources you're tying up, and the less benefit you're getting relative to these other players.
Mm-hmm.
So like in a 2-player game, where John and I are battling for one city. Okay, I'm out 1 meeple, he's out 1 meeple. We're both out the same. If we're playing against Susie and Brett, and we're battling for a city, and John and I are battling for a city, we're both out 1 meeple. Our opponents are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we're trying to build this city or not build this city, depending on whatever it is, Brett's and Susie's meeple are outscoring points.
They're applying that throughput mindset.
They're
flowing meeples out in and out, left and right.
Exactly. So if in general you're stuck,
we're stuck. Like we're stuck in this situation where we're fighting.
Yeah,
over the city.
Exactly. And so these 2 people suffer and the other 2 people gain.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it's just 1-on-1, you're both suffering relatively equally, and so it's not as bad for you to try and snake in.
Yeah.
But another thing to think about is when you try and snake projects, usually it makes it less likely that the project will complete.
Right.
Especially when it's a city, less so when it's a road.
Because roads tend to just complete on their own sometimes.
Exactly.
People.
Yeah. So I mean, and a city is also has
much more points.
It's so much more points. Your opponent will get much angrier if you snake their city than if you snake their road.
Yeah.
Which we can talk a little bit about at the end.
Whether that's logical or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. But you can think of it as like, okay, if you both have 1 meeple in this city, and it's just you 2 playing, then like if I add more points to the city, then I'm also giving my opponent an equal amount of points. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually not creating any advantage for myself to building this city out more.
Right.
Which is why in 2-player, when there's a tie in a feature, they tend not to be. There's no incentive for either player to complete the city,
right,
or the feature.
Mm-hmm.
Now in 4 players and 3 players, you actually do have to think of it.
Yeah.
You kind of have to adjust your mindset and think less of when you have a tie ball game as far as how many meeples are in there. Then you actually probably do still want to build it out a little bit, because building it out gives you points over the 3rd guy or the 4th guy that aren't involved.
We call this a joint venture.
Yeah, a joint venture. It's very much like, I mean, if you watched listen to our Risk episode,
mm-hmm.
You've gotten all of our Orcaton. Yeah. It's all about like ally theory, sort of this idea, the theory of like why alliances are good.
Mm-hmm.
You're both getting an advantage over whoever's not in the joint venture.
Exactly.
But I would say, like, and if it's a big city, of course, you both players really need to get those points.
Yeah.
But there's still less incentive to build there at times.
Right. And the other thing though that's important is not, so yes, you and the person you're building with both want to complete the city. The other player or other 2 people
really
want to thwart you.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really in their best interest to put down a tile that just messes your whole city up, and like blocks the one tile you need to complete, or it's just a mess. So that's much more likely to happen in like a 3 or a 4 player game, and to hurt you. Right. So that's why you should be really cautious about trying to either leech, so share or steal, the more players there are in the game, just as a general rule.
Right. Yeah. So we've talked about stealing cities. We've talked a little bit about stealing roads. I mean, roads seem a little bit less impactful, but still, like, I mean, you definitely gotta keep it in mind. But like you said, I never really get mad when someone steals a road from me, or like, Well, stealing a road, like leeching onto a road, I don't care. If someone steals a road, I can get a little bit mad.
Sure, exactly.
But it doesn't seem like as big of a deal.
And it also just seems like a lot of resources to deploy for not a lot of points.
Right. If you're putting 2 meeples down for one road, it seems like you're wasting a lot of potential meeple scoring.
Exactly.
That road better be flipping along.
Yeah.
And roads don't, in my experience, don't really get past like 10.
It needs to be either long or definitely going to complete.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
exactly. Something
like
where...
it's 5 tiles out into the abyss, and all you need is a road end, and it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
but the last thing that I feel like is probably the most important thing to try and steal or leech is fields.
Yes.
Also, for me, one of the harder ones to wrap my head around because it's a little bit hard to visualize.
Definitely.
But stealing fields seems very relevant in like every game that I play.
Definitely. Yeah, a lot of the times the game will come down to who has the best field placement. And the thing we've mentioned also about fields is usually this happens late in the game. So, you can easily be ahead for most of the game and just be sitting pretty. And then someone sneaks in and gains access to a good field and overshoots you, or they might be able to snake in and take your field. So I think the reason that fields tend to be so important is, one, they happen, like I said, they tend to happen very fast toward the end of the game, and they're just very they can score so many points easily. I mean, the more cities are built, like as a general helpful rule, the smaller cities tend to be, the more you have to look out for fields.
Yeah, right.
More aware. I mean, if you have 2 sprawling 10 square metropoles, then don't worry too much about fields. But if you have 10 little 4-point cities, you should be looking at fields relatively early, because they're going to be big and you want access to them. I mean, we're talking like potentially 20-30 points.
Yeah,
on a
24 points I've definitely seen happen.
Yeah, I've seen as many as 33 actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wild. I mean, I think the issue with putting the farmer on the field early is that you have this farmer that's worth a lot of points, but also if someone pulls off a snag, then they've at the end of the game, then they've had that meeple the whole game.
Yep.
And then if you guys even share the points for the field after they've had that meeple for the whole game, they're probably going to be at an advantage because they were scoring with the meeple that whole time that you had it on the field. I think because I was playing around with some strategy where I was putting down some early farmers, and I think that can only be successful if you maintain total control of the field. If you end up sharing the field after putting down an early farmer, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah. I guess not that it's not worth it, but yeah, like John said, you've scored fewer points because you put it down earlier. So this is kind of part of the reason why it's great. I mean, I love it when I've been playing when I have lots of meeple in hand toward the end of the game, because I don't have to be stingy about where I put down my farmers. Like if I have, if there's a field that, I might be able to snake into this big field and earn all these points, I might be willing to take a risk and put down, one of my 4 meeples with 6 turns left, and just try for it. Which is another reason why the throughput mindset is so important. You want those meeples able to deploy by the end of the game. But one more thing I wanted to say about fields is, if you don't get the biggest field, don't enter sort of a pissing contest here. There's lots of different ways to score points on fields. Like you put down a 6-point field toward the end of the game, that can be huge, or a 9-point field. You notice that there's a corner with 2 unfinished cities, and you make up your mind, okay, I'm gonna finish those and grab that field, or I don't know. Anyway, sometimes really small fields can touch 3 or 4 cities. And so you should be on the lookout for those fields, especially if you don't get the sort of alpha field.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. Okay, so I know we're pretty
we're about an hour
past
and 5
on time
right now.
Yeah, but
I mean, we've talked about stealing and leeching.
Yep.
The other thing that you can do that's not quite as aggressive is blocking and thwarting, as we have it.
But it can be just as fun.
It can be just as fun. And I mean, again, that's what Daniel actually advised me on in our game earlier today. I was like, oh man, I don't think I can put this tile in any way that makes it harder for you to complete or like place the feature that you would need to place to win. And Dan's like, oh no, you can do that. You just need to turn it the other way and put it here. And I put the tile down where Dan recommended, and then all of a sudden he drew the exact tile that he would have been able to place had I not followed his advice. But he didn't. He couldn't place it because I had placed a nearby tile to make it harder for him to complete his city or to add to his city in this case.
Exactly. Yeah, and in this case it was placing a tile that I would have been able to claim like a huge 6 tile incomplete city on the last turn, and it would have won me the game. Yeah.
So you didn't even need,
I dug my own grave there, but yeah, that's the idea is blocking your opponents can be a very effective thing to do if again, like we said, you're not going to be placing a meeple every turn. You shouldn't be. There's not going to be profitable projects every turn. So when you don't have those profitable projects, you need to be looking at thwarting your opponents. How do I block off a big road? And the best thing is like you're playing 3 or 4, like 2 or 3 more players, and they're battling for a city, and you block off that city from being completed. And it's like Ed has 2 meeple he can never play again, and Sam has 1 meeple he can never play again.
There's Stu.
Stu. Oh, Stu's been dead since the beginning.
Oh no!
But Stu's never played before.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, like we just it can be very satisfying to block somebody off a big project, and not only does it block them from getting their meeple back, it opens up opportunities for you because more tiles, the same number of tiles are still being placed, but your opponents aren't placing as many meeples, so you have more opportunities to claim stuff in the final turns. If you can trap
their meeples is what you're saying?
If you can trap their meeple. And in the final turns, like if you have 3 or 4 more meeple that you place, and instead of placing 2, 3, and 4 on your last 3 turns, you might get a 5, 7, and 4 or whatever.
Gotcha.
So that's a fun thing to keep in mind.
I mean, I feel like the same sort of things apply where it's like, okay, whenever you're playing an antagonistic strategy, like we said, it's going to be better in 2-player. But like Dan said, in 3 and 4-player, if you can block multiple players at a time, that's also great.
Oh yeah.
I also think it conflicts a tiny bit with the throughput mindset. So you like in the way that like you really have to be cautious in deciding whether there's anything more productive to be done with this tile than to block someone. Yep, but there definitely are cases where like, and the one I can think of is like, say you have a city tile with like 3 open edges, and you don't want to add that to any of your cities because it'll make them like impossible to complete. Well, you can put it nearby like someone else's city.
Exactly.
And maybe it adds 1 point to their incomplete city, but like it also just destroys their chances of completing it.
Exactly.
So something like that, where like you don't have a productive place to put it, boom, go ahead and block someone. Because like Dan said, it can put you up a meeple, and being up a meeple is huge.
Especially early in the game.
Yeah.
So and a good rule of thumb here, just like you want to build your tiles out because it makes it easier to finish your projects, you want to try and surround the tiles that your opponents need as much as possible. Even if you don't know exactly what's left in the deck, it's usually, it's generally true that like it's harder to build on a certain tile the more surrounded it is with other tiles.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dan, this game, like many other games we've covered, is played between people. Okay, and people. No, not Meeple. People. People. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Between people with Meeple.
Yes.
Okay. And like we've talked about in every episode, pretty much, except backgammon. People are imperfect and they're susceptible to rhetoric.
Yes.
So.
Well, we're social creatures.
Yeah, and this is another game, just like any other game where you got a lot of people playing and teaming up and stuff. You can definitely spin stuff.
Oh yeah.
To get people to do what you want.
Yes.
Again, it's a game where if you understand who's a threat and who's not a threat, and if people think that, if you can make it so that you don't seem like a threat, and then you guys should focus on blocking this player because they're gonna destroy us, it can be huge for your advantage in like 3 or 4 player games.
Yeah, definitely.
Additionally, and it'll help you convince people to work with you on joint ventures.
Yep.
When they don't think that if people think you're winning, then why would they work with you on a joint venture? Because they're still gonna lose to you.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think like I said earlier, I think people are more liable to get angry if you snake into their city, for example. And so I think this might sound silly, but it might actually be a good idea to, if you find yourself doing that, like maybe say, oh, sorry, man, or, sorry, I just had to do it, I
didn't have anywhere better to put it.
I didn't have anywhere better to put it, like make it seem like you're not in it to screw them over, you're just like, you're just playing by the rules, and you're just doing what's best, and don't take it personally.
Like, I'm just making sure no one else,
Yeah.
I'm just making sure no one else gets into the city,
or like, maybe even better, like you connect better from a social perspective, but like you have a 2-point city and you have a 2-tile city and they have a 2-tile city, and you connect it, and now it's a 10-tile city, and you both win and everybody else loses, yeah, let's go. It can be sort of cooperative in that way. So just be like thinking about it. Don't put a target on your back.
Definitely
don't try not to seem like you're in first, although it's kind of hard because you walk
if
you
there
walk
are
your
3
dude
players
on
that
the
are
scoreboard.
There's a whole scoreboard thing, but if you're playing with people that are pretty decent at judging who's in the lead, and like that know how to block, it's like if you have 3 people dogpiling on you, I think you can easily get overwhelmed. Yeah. So like Dan says, don't put a target on your back. Also, like if you are ahead on the scoreboard, try and emphasize how many. Oh, but so and so has like 6 meeples down, and look how big this city is, and it's about to finish. Emphasize if you have a lot of points scored, emphasize other players' potential points. Yeah, and it'll make your position seem less strong. Yeah. Like similarly, like if you don't have a lot of points in the scoreboard, de-emphasize your potential points. Talk about how, like I got this city going, but like I need one of these like 2 or 3 specific tiles. Like I just, there's no way I'm going to finish this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff like that. To sort of just make it seem like just emphasize, the points that make you seem like less of a threat. Yeah,
definitely. And I think one more point here is like, talking is definitely a big part of the game, or it can be, depending on who you're playing with.
It's a pretty friendly game. Like
it's friendly. It's almost like shooting craps a little bit.
You're not attacking someone.
Yeah. What I will say is I just thought about this. I could be dead wrong, but I think it's a little harder to be apologetic when you're not doing a joint venture, but you're actually blocking someone from completing a city or something like that.
Right.
So I think actually when it comes to that, you should maybe be as quiet as possible and kind of try and fly under the radar.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about blocking is they might not even realize in the moment that they're blocked,
Right.
Or it might not be true that they're blocked in the moment, but in a few turns, it turns out all those tiles are gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
for sure. So, be sly, be sneaky, but don't be too sneaky.
Yeah. and it's becoming clearer and clearer if you've been listening to our podcasts how truly, truly bad we are at deception.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of what we think deception, like good deception really is. So don't take our word for it.
I mean, that's the thing. We're talking about, you got to convince people this, convince people that. The act of convincing people of something makes them trust you less. Like as soon as people feel like they're being convinced of something, they're immediately have mistrust towards you, because they're like, okay, this person probably has an agenda for like getting me to think this way. So you got to be sly. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can't really train you guys on that, but I wish we could.
I think practice will make perfect.
Right.
And that's the nice thing about this game. It's easy to practice. So.
Yep. And as we were looking up on the Wikipedia page, apparently there's a ton of different expansions for it.
So many. Many.
I mean, we only ever played with the Abbot and the River. And the River is sort of, like Abbot we've already mentioned, the River is sort of interesting. You kind of have to, it creates some pretty interesting stuff with how the fields take shape. And it also gives a lot more structure to the opening game. But overall, I don't think it really changes too much of the core. Right. It kind of, I don't know, it's sort of aesthetically pleasing, which is good.
Yes.
But there are like crazy expansions, and I have no idea if they're even sold because I haven't even seen them on the market. But like, there's a Plague expansion. There's like, an expansion. There's like, it seemed like there's like a seafaring with a giant expansion.
Meeple, right?
There's that one, and that one is actually commonly played. You can play that on the apps. Okay. Carcassonne also easily available through phone and computer apps. So just a few bucks, but I mean, it's very good interface. Like the official apps are very
great way to learn. Great way to learn too.
They're solid. They have like different personalities of AI, which is kind of fun to learn against. But yeah, like even in that game, you can play with the big Meeple. I forget what expansion that is, but it's like we didn't look too much into it. We just kind of played with the River and the Abbot, and it seems like they, the creator's gotten pretty inventive with these. But I'm just not sure how popular any of them are, or if they're in like large scale production. But I don't know. They're probably pretty sick. That's about all I can say about them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Go try them out. Or start with the basic pack, and if you like it, keep going, and if not, you can listen to our next episode.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, I don't know if we even got into this, but I'm pretty sure the guy who created it is just a school teacher. He's like a high school teacher.
Oh, I
believe it says that on the box of the game, and so I don't know. Just think about that. When you're putting money in this game, you're just supporting, a lovely guy.
Supporting our teachers.
Supporting the teachers, supporting just probably some dude who just loves board games, and you know what I mean? It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay.
Dan, you want to close us out?
Sure. Thank you for listening to this episode. We had a great time learning and teaching you about Carcassonne. Go play, have fun, try the expansions, and we'll see you next time. This has been How to Beat Your Kids at Board Games.
Signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode of How to Beat Your Kids at Board Games. We hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something, because we always do. If you like our show, please tell your friends, and be sure to rate or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by typing our acronym HTBYKABG in the search bar. Again, that's HTBYKABG. If you have questions, comments, feedback, or suggestions for games you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us at htbykabg@gmail.com or message us on social media. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.